Welcome to the Selling Show, where we unpack, repack, and break down exactly how top experts sell their ideas, their value, and their services. This is your host, David Newman, and you are in the right place if you want better clients, bigger deals, and higher fees. Creative? No. You're not creative. You're not creative at all. Listen, this is hopeless. Maybe with a different opinion, though, my next guest will have some creative inspiration for you. Please welcome Dr. Amy Climer.
Hi, David. So good to be here.
So great to have you. So tell us about the Amy Climer empire. What is it that you do? Give us the backstory of how you came to the work that you're doing today, and then we'll dive in from there.
So I have a consulting practice that I've had since 2009, and mostly my work falls under the umbrella of creativity and innovation. So I help organizations understand how creativity actually works so they can be more innovative in their work. And, whether it's producing new products or changing, I almost dread to say the word pivoting, but that's gotten a little overused lately. But whatever they need to do to be really responsive and be more, better at serving their customers, their clients in a creative way.
And then, so tell us about what are the different revenue streams, different things that you sell, different ways that you deliver this awesomeness.
Okay, so there's sort of a lot of little pieces underneath that umbrella. I'm do a fair bit of keynote speaking, training, a little bit of coaching, but speaking and training is definitely a big part of it, whether it's, keynote speaking, like on a big stage, or smaller groups training. I came to this work as a trainer. That's really my love. I love getting in with smaller groups and just diving into the details and making it very experiential and interactive and helping them really understand the content. I also lately have been emceeing because I have this background in facilitation, and the emceeing has kind of evolved as this combination of sort of this facilitation training angle and this keynote speaking. And it's kind of this really cool melding. So that's been something I've been doing for about a year or so. And I love it. I love emceeing, especially with groups that are interested in actually having conversations with each other and like interacting. And I can help facilitate that from the stage. And then I also have some products. I have a couple online courses, and maybe the product I'm known the most for is this deck of cards called Climer Cards. And it is a physical deck of cards. It looks like playing cards. And its purpose is to help deepen conversations, get people talking at a deeper level. It's also an ideation tool. And these have been off for about 10 years. They've been used in 40 countries around the world. And then when the pandemic hit in 2020, facilitators and trainers that were using them were saying, Amy, how do I use these virtually? And I actually already had a prototype for a virtual version. And so I was able to launch virtual Climer Cards, which allows you to basically use the deck in a virtual space like Zoom or WebEx or whatever platform you're on.
Very cool. So I want to get back to the cards, but I also want to go back to my little opening wisecrack, because I saw a video clip on your website where you ask an entire audience, okay, who feels they're creative? And of course, it's a trick question.
Right.
But, Denzel Washington, talk to me like I'm a 7-year-old. When you say creativity in business, innovation, tapping into our creative resource, what is your definition of creativity? And are we all creative? Are none of us creative? What's going on with that?
All right, good question. So the definition that I use is creativity is novelty that is valuable. So novelty meaning original, unique, new, different, like, you're bringing something new, but not just for the sake of something new. I think people sometimes get frustrated with that. You're like, you could look up, failed inventions and see all sorts of things. You're like, what were they thinking? No one needed that. But then that valuable piece is really key there, that whatever this novel thing is, that actually provides value. And I mean value in the broadest of sense. It could be financial value. It could be emotional, intellectual. It could make your life easier, like whatever it is. So with that definition, most people, when they hear that, they're like, oh, okay, maybe I could be a little more creative than I thought, because it has nothing to do with your ability to draw, has nothing to do with your artistic talent. While there could be an overlap, you need some creativity to be artistic. You don't need artistic talent to be creative. So that's a really key piece. Yes, I ask people all the time. I ask my audiences, raise your hand if you think you're creative. And the good news is I've been asking that question for maybe 15 or 20 years. And over the decades, more people are saying yes. Now, of course, there's some people that raise their hand because they're like, I think the right answer is yes.
Right. Peer pressure.
Exactly, right? One time, though, I literally had an audience member where she got this like big bug-eyed look on her face and she put her hands under her legs. She sat on her hands. She's like, oh no, I am not creative. But then when I start talking to someone about it, they're like, oh, well, yeah, I come up with new ideas. Yeah. And that's all it is. And I really believe that we all are creative. And if you're not feeling creative, it just means you've kind of ignored that part of yourself for so long that it's gotten a bit dormant.
Yeah.
And I mean, look around in the space you're in right now. Like every single thing, like I'm in an office, every single thing in this room, with the exception of some potted plants, humans have made up. Like this is just in our DNA. We cannot help ourselves but to come up with new ideas and implement them.
Yes. Love that. I also want to ask you about how creativity connects with the F word. Yes, that's right. The F word. This is not going to be a rated like X podcast or anything. I do have episodes, by the way, where people drop all kinds of language like, well, there goes our E rating on this episode. In this case, though, it's fun. So the relationship between creativity and fun, and maybe especially as we start talking about sales and some sales blockages, when people take whatever part of their work so seriously, it's so hard. Oh my God, we got to grind. We got to work. There is no fun. There is no life. There is no energy here. That obviously takes a huge toll on their creative quotient. Whereas when they can look at things a little more creatively, a little bit more, connect the dots. How could this be more fun, more innovative, more different? How can I look at this differently than I've looked at it in the past? How does creativity connect with fun?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do think sometimes, in certain offices and certain cultures, work cultures, you do get really serious. And I mean, understandably, because, the work is real, the work is important, right? But I think sometimes we get confused that they have to be mutually exclusive. Like you do the fun stuff on the weekends and then the serious stuff happens during the week. Definitely, I think when you can relax and let go of those expectations of, we have to be a certain way at work, and you can relax and be a little lighthearted, more fun, you do end up being more creative. You come up with wilder ideas, wackier, kind of zanier ideas. And some of those ideas, honestly, they're not going to be any good. I do believe there are bad ideas out there, but those ideas might lead to something else that never would have come up with had you not brought up that initial idea, the silly idea, the one that you're not going to use. So especially if you're in a collaborative place and you're working with other people. Yes. And that's one of the purposes of Climer Cards is the deck. There's these 50 images that they're all paintings that I did, these little like iconic drawings of, there's like a giraffe and a spool of thread and a candle. And the idea there is to use them as images to spark new ideas that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise.
Are you loving this interview as much as I am? Holy smokes. Hey, you know what this reminds me of? There's a fantastic sales book that you got to get your hands on right here, right now. It's called Do It Selling. How do I know it's great? Well, I wrote it and you need to read it. Pop over right now to doitselling.com. Now, back to our interview. I know one of because I was in a session of yours where you used the cards. Now, one of the cards is a mountain, correct?
Yes.
Like a mountaintop. So if we were to talk about sales, there it is, exactly right. If we were to say, okay, for any given prospect, for any given sales opportunity, think of this like climbing a mountain. And what are some things you would do in preparation for climbing the mountain they might also have some equivalent to what you do preparing for a sales conversation or an initial sales conversation. And people might come up with all kinds of parallels. And so talk a little bit like, how would you facilitate that? I don't want to run the exercise because I'm not the expert here, but let's say that we have this amazing group of consultants, coaches, trainers, professional services sellers, and they don't like to sell. And it's like, oh God, no, not another episode of this show. And now we have the Climer card for a mountain. Mm-hmm. What are some variations of that exercise that might stimulate different brain cells than they've ever used before in thinking about how to make sales more fun, more palatable, be more prepared for sales conversations, etc.?
Okay, so there's a couple angles you could take with this. The first is we could continue on this mountain metaphor. And I actually have spent a good part of my life leading people backpacking, climbing mountains. I used to work for Outward Bound. So this metaphor, I understand very well.
And this is why your last name is Climer, but no B. Climer.
No B. I'm like the only person in my family that does any climbing.
That's funny.
So we could continue on with this metaphor and we could talk about, yes, like if you're going to climb a mountain, there's all this prep you do in advance, just like in sales. But I think what's actually more powerful in this case, if I was working with a group of salespeople, we're all there together, I would spread the cards out on the table and say, one of the big pieces of selling, I think, and I am not a sales expert like you are, David, but obviously I've had enough success to have my own business for a while, right? Is whatever it is you're selling, you got to love that thing and you got to believe in it. And you have to have this deep conviction that what you're selling is valuable and worthwhile, and it's going to help the people that you're sharing it with. I think of it less as selling and more as like supporting them and sharing with them. So anyway, I would lay these cards out on the table and ask the group, each person pick a card that represents the product that you're selling. And so that helps them kind of understand that deeper, their product, like what is it they love about the product. And then maybe another card pick a card that represents who's the ideal person for this product or service or item. Or maybe you ask a question, pick a card. What's the best card that represents the person you're talking to tomorrow morning on a sales call? And just to start thinking about and really getting in touch with like what it is you're selling and who you're talking to. Does that make sense?
Yes. And just to put ourselves in this seminar setting, we each have a deck of Climer cards in front of us. Is that correct?
Well, typically you would just have like a deck in front of like per table, or
okay.
If we're on Zoom, then we use it virtually and everybody can see the cards.
So you could pick, I'm sure there's like a puppy dog. You could pick like a pickaxe or some tool. So there's all kinds of different things. And then what's really fascinating about this, Amy, is there's a very personal connection to the card that you pick for any given prompt or any given activity. And then how do you do this in a group where, I've picked the puppy dog, someone else picks the VW bus, someone else picks the mountaintop. You kind of walk us through processing this in some way, correct?
Yeah. So two things. First, I think the reason I say, we can continue on that mountain metaphor, or everyone could pick their own. And I think the value of everyone picking their own is now I have this image, this metaphor that really works for me. Yeah. I mean, if I grew up in Florida. Okay. So I didn't even see a mountain until I was, double digits, 10, right. 15, I don't know. So to ask me that question, like, what are you going to do to prepare to climb a mountain? I don't know. I didn't know then. Right. So everyone has a metaphor that really works for them. And I think that's the key piece. And then, it may be that they're sharing at the table, they're sharing out in pairs, that you can kind of set it up however you want, but that they're talking through like, here's why I picked this card. Here's the way I see our product. And so it's helping them really connect to it. And it might, help them share some ideas. Maybe somebody's like, ooh, I like your metaphor better. I'm going to use that one instead, which is totally cool. The power of using these images is in the question you ask. And you could use them privately, like for yourself, or you can use them with a group. So if you wanted to really dig into like the sales process, you could say, pick a card that represents the current sales process that you're using, and then pick another card that represents what you want the sales process to be like. And now you have this great conversation about how do we close that gap and how do we change the sales process? And anyway, we could go on and on, but that's just another example.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like the cards are really sort of keys that help you unlock these facilitated conversations, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And that's where it's not like, well, I'm just going to buy a deck of cards and walk myself through the process. I mean, you can do that certainly once you've gotten some training or once you've been to one of your seminars. But I think being in the room and experiencing this, that's where they really get the light bulb moments, right?
Yeah. And that's where I've had, trainers, facilitators, even speakers, after they've used Climer Cards, they come up to me like at an event or if we're on a webinar and they're like, Amy, I love these things. I love using Climer Cards because there's something about them, like being able to, point to this image and have a conversation based on that rather than just asking the question without the conversation. Asking the question without the card. You could do that. But with the images, it really helps people get more specific, more focused. They go deeper. It's kind of, remarkably powerful.
Yes. I want to go behind the scenes a little bit, kind of go behind the curtain in Dr. Amy Climer world. You mentioned about, I'm okay at sales. I mean, after all, I've been running this business for quite a long time. What has been your journey of, leaving some environment where you did not have to sell? It wasn't even a thing. And then realizing that as an entrepreneur, yeah, I love doing the work, but the part before that means I have to sell the work. And what were some ahas and early lessons as you got more comfortable selling yourself?
Yeah, that's great. It's definitely been a journey. I was so bad at this when I started.
Me too, by the way.
Yeah. It is funny. We often teach what we've learned, you're probably good at this because you've really dug into it. Yeah, in fact, so I started in 2009. I didn't know anything about, knew nothing about sales. I didn't know anything about, National Speakers Association or these organizations like that where I could learn more. And after the first 2 years in business, I said, gosh, if this doesn't improve in the third year, I'm going to have to stop doing this. I mean, it was bad. Anyway, obviously I eventually got better. And I think there's so many things that have helped me. A couple I'll point out. One is what I mentioned before is knowing what it is you're selling or knowing what it is you have available, right? So usually what happens for me is I get on a call with a client, especially if it's going to be more of like a training, speaking type of engagement. And I just ask a lot of questions. And I think that is the key is really asking the questions to understand what are their problems? What can I do for them? And if I go into that conversation and I'm have in my mind, if I sell this, I'm going to make X amount of money. And, I really want to work with them. They're a really prestigious client. Or if I'm thinking of anything that is about me, it's just a small disaster. And because, people can just smell that, right? Even through Zoom, right? We know that. How many, we've all had those those bad conversations or interactions with salespeople. And so if the first thing is to go in just with this mindset of service. And that is something that I think I actually have been good at all along. But what I wasn't always good at, and I've gotten a lot better at, is this concept of be easy to buy. And I know, I think when I first started out, I thought, I'm going to be super flexible and I'm going to customize everything to a client. But what I found out is that clients actually sometimes don't want that. They're like, let me have a choice of 3 keynotes of yours that I can pick from.
Right.
And they love that because it's so much easier than let's have a collaborative conversation about what I'm going to talk about. And they're like, I don't know. So just being really easy to buy and being clear about it. And the other thing I've learned is just, especially at the end of the phone call, ask them hey, what are you thinking? Do you want to move forward? Do you want me as your keynote speaker? Or do you want me to do this training? Or just asking them. And they might not be able to tell you in the moment, but they can tell you what they're thinking. They can be like, yeah, we can't decide right now. We have to go back to this committee, but I love what you're saying. I really like this and I really want you.
Yeah.
Cool. That tells me that we're moving into this most likely a yes.
Yes.
Versus sometimes what I used to do way in the beginning is I didn't know how to end that call. And so I wasn't really clear what was going to happen next.
Right.
It's going to be me or them or who's doing what. Yeah. And so sometimes I find that I often guide that process. I'm like, okay, cool. So here's the next steps. Once you all have made a decision, here's what's going to happen, or here's what I'll send you to help you make a decision, whatever needs to be done. Sometimes we make a decision right there, which that's the easiest sometimes.
Right. For sure. I love what you're saying, because that is true sales leadership, where you are leading the conversation. The person who asks the questions remains in control of the conversation. Mm-hmm. The other beauty of this, Amy, is that one of the mantras that I really believe in, an early sales mentor shared this with me, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so good. He says, a prospect who is listening is not a prospect. And he just kind of left it there. And I was like, prospect who's listening is not a so a prospect who is talking is a prospect. Like when I'm talking and the prospect is like, not a prospect. Your
eyes are glazing over,
them, right? It's like when they're talking, now they're a prospect. Yeah. So like you said, the moment that we take the spotlight off of us, what am I going to sell? What am I going to pitch? Oh God, this will be a 20K deal. This is going to be awesome. How do I convince them? How do I persuade them? You've lost it. You've lost it. When your focus is 1,000% on that prospect, what they want, what they need, the words they're using to describe their problem, the words they're using to describe their ultimate outcome, what they really want, what they really need, what their team is after, what this event is designed to do. I mean, that's giving you 100% of everything that you need to know to close that deal. And you ask questions, you dig, you uncover. And I love your closing questions like, well, what are you thinking? Are we leaning yes? Are we leaning no? Do you like what you've heard so far? Would you like to move ahead with us? Great. That's it. I mean, human to human selling and prospect centric, right? The moment that we're speaker centric or coach centric or consultant centric, that's where we start pitching. That's where we start getting nervous. That's where we start, begging and chasing and persuading and convincing, and that never ends well. Speaking of begging, chasing, persuading, and convincing, I know you have an unselling story to share with us, and I was saving this for towards the end. So hit us with the unselling experience that you've had.
Yeah. So this was an experience I had, last year, the year before, and I going to be a little bit vague on purpose, but I needed some more training in a certain area at my business. And so I was looking around like, who are the experts in this area? I want to learn more how to do this. And I found this woman. I thought, okay, she looks like she knows what she's doing. She has this online course, very typical process. It started out as a webinar. I watched the free webinar. At the end, it was a sell of but it was sort of vague. It was basically like, if you want to buy the course, you have to get on a call with one of our coaches. Cool. She didn't say what the cost was, but I guess I knew it was about a $10,000 thing. And I was totally fine with that. I was okay, this fits. This is what I need. I got on the call with the coach, and it was a little bit awkward only because I could tell she was sort of following a little bit of a script, and she was asking questions that kind of followed a script, and I could kind of see the path, but I was like, whatever, I'm going with it. So she gets to the end and she's laying it all out, and here's the cost. And I was like, great. I was like, actually, this sounds like it might be a really good fit for me. Could you just send me the link and I'll think about it and I'll make a decision the next day or two? And she said, oh no, I can't send you a link. I was like, what do you mean you can't send me a link? I'm thinking, how am I going to pay for this? Obviously it's like a credit card thing. I didn't think I was going to mail them a check. But anyway, she's like, no, I can't send you a link. You have to pay right now. And I was like, why? What? No. And this is like a $10,000 thing. So I was just like, I just wanted to sit with it. I don't know, maybe some people throw on $10,000, no problem, but I wanted to really sit with this and just make sure. And so we get into the conversation continues, and I'm kind of pushing her and challenging her a little bit. And she basically comes out and says, well, I don't want to send you a link because I know that if you don't sign up right now, then you might not sign up. And I was like, oh, wow. And I'm thinking to myself, I am learning a lot about this person and really the company's integrity. And I'm not liking it. I'm like, this is not cool. And, you're trying to hook me in, even though I might be annoyed 3 days later and have sort of buyer's remorse. Like, what? So I basically said, okay, well, in that case, it's a no. I said, I will not sign up now. If you're interested in sending me a link, that's cool. I'll consider it. But I mean, at this point, like I am like feeling just icky.
Yeah.
And she finally agrees to send me a link. So she sends me a link and I thought hard about it because I really wanted to take the course. It was like a year-long program. I wanted to learn what they had to learn, but a part of what they were teaching was going to involve sales. I was like, I don't want to sell this way. This is the used car salesman. This is like what everyone just feels icky. And I never pressure my clients. I'm like, if you call me, I don't care what we're talking about. You are welcome to pay for it right there in the moment if that's easy. But if you want to think about it, I mean, what do I care? You know, it's not like I need this money today. I want you to be happy. I want you to feel like this is a really good fit. So anyway, I thought long and hard about it. And I eventually just couldn't get over the ickiness. And I said no. And then I turned around and bought from a similar program from somebody else who had no sales pressure, who actually was charging less money. So it was beneficial for me. To me, that was the transactional versus like the relationship sales, you know?
Oh, totally. Totally. It's like, is this good for me or is this good for you?
Yeah,
like,
right.
This is more good for you than it is good for me.
Yeah, you're working on a commission, aren't you?
Right, exactly. You can sense that commission breath. Well, and that's I think the best sales conversations are completely pressure-free and completely judgment-free.
Yeah.
So for example, I just talked to a guy and this is funny. So sometimes it's like, I practice exactly what I preach. And sometimes I'm like, oh, come on, I know better. But this was one where I practiced what I preached. And he says, I'm looking at one other program. And I said, great. I said, do you mind sharing what the other program was? And it was a great program. And I know the guy and we're friends and we've done cross promotions and I believe in his work and he believes in my work. And I said, you know what? No matter which one of us you pick, you're going to make a great decision. But I do want to ask you just one question as we're wrapping up here. Right now, based on what you and I talked about and based on whatever conversations you've had with them, which way are you leaning? I thought that was a fair question.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And he said, and he gave me the highest compliment I think possible in this kind of sales conversation. He says, David, if this other guy didn't exist, I wouldn't hesitate. It's you 100%. If you didn't exist, he says to me, I would hop in with him. No hesitation, 100%. It's really a style question because you have that kind of, East Coast, no nonsense kind of vibe. This guy, totally opposite, California, West Coast, laid back. And I'm just deciding it's really a style question.
Totally.
I said, perfect, great. I sent him a link. Amy, I sent him a link. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll send you the link. If you decide it's us, welcome aboard. If you decide it's them, let me repeat, you cannot make a bad choice here. And good luck making the decision. I hope we have a chance to work together. If not, no harm, no foul. Off he goes. So, and this is true in negotiating. It's true in everything. If you are willing to let go of the outcome, right? Complete detachment, the pressure goes down to zero. And when the pressure goes down to zero, think about all the non-buyers, all the people who did not buy from us. So number one, if they love the experience, they're going to come back for something else at some other time. If they said no, but they love the experience, they're going to refer people even though they didn't buy. So your reputation in the marketplace, and again, speaking, coaching, consulting, very small world, right? You can't burn bridges. You can't be a jerk. So there's so many reasons to have this pressure-free sales conversation. I'm ranting now, but thank you for sharing that unselling conversation.
I agree with you.
Totally, right? I mean, like, who wants to feel that way? And again, if that's how the relationship starts, imagine later on, it's like, it's not going to get better. Like wherever it starts, right? It's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse.
Yeah. We're supposed to be like on our best, most politest behavior at the beginning, right?
Exactly.
Like, oh, this is not going to go well. Yeah.
Exactly. Holy smokes, so much value in this episode. Listen, if you are loving what you're hearing, feel free to download, subscribe, tell a friend, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to The Selling Show. Now, back to the interview. So as we're landing the plane here, two final questions for you. The final question is, where can people go to get more Amy Climer brilliance and get connected and stay connected to your world? Before we get to that, though, second to last question, if folks were to take one overarching concept from our conversation today about being more innovative, being more creative, adding novelty that adds value to their business, to their sales process, whatever it might be, what do you hope that overarching takeaway concept should be?
I think, well, something that I didn't mention, but kind of a mantra that sort of fits with, I think, some of what we're talking about here. One of my mantras is be deliberate to be creative. Like, your creativity, your innovation will not happen by accident. I can pretty much promise that. You know, you hear these stories of like, oh, like the apple fell on Newton's head and then he all of a sudden discovered gravity. It's like, no, that is not how the story goes, right? That's the myth of the story. There's way more to it and all this work that he did. And I think, whatever it is you're doing, the sales element, you're trying more creative in your work, whatever it is, like, be deliberate about it, be intentional. And I think that's a really great way to show up in a sales conversation, is being deliberate, being grounded and present, and going in thinking, how can I serve? Those two things, the how can I serve and the be deliberate to be creative, have served me very well.
Love it. Where can our listeners go, Amy Climer, to get connected and stay connected to the Amy Climer universe? And we're going to put all of these links, by the way, in the show notes. But Amy, tell us where people can go, get some stuff, connect with you, maybe download some goodies, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're interested in Climer Cards and just checking them out, you can go to climercards.com, and Climer is spelled Climer. Climercards.com. On that website, there is a link. There's a book. You click on where it says book at the top, and there's a free ebook you can download. It talks about how to use Climer Cards. It'll explain what I talked about today in the podcast. So you can definitely check those out. You can order a deck if you want. I also, once a month or so, I do free webinars. Anyone's welcome to them. They're all listed on that website under events, so you can check that out. If you're interested more in like creativity and digging into this, that website is climerconsulting.com. So again, it's Climer consulting.com. And I have a podcast, which you can find on there, called The Deliberate Creative. You can also find it on all the usual podcast places. And there's over 100 episodes. A lot of the episodes have free downloads if you're interested in them. There's like the first few episodes, there's a workbook that goes along with it if you want to really dig into how to be more creative. So those are a couple great resources, and feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, but don't reach out to me to sell me something.
No connect and pitch for Amy Climer.
Exactly. I will not
connect and pitch.
This has become the bane of LinkedIn.
Oh my God. Sure has. It sure has. So all of these fantastic links will be directly under this episode at thesellingshow.com. Do connect with Amy. She is absolutely brilliant. The resources are great. TED Talk also, right? You got the TED Talk up there. And can you just, in our last 60 seconds, sneak peek around the new book?
Okay, yeah. There is book that there's two. There's one that I just came out last week called Virtual Facilitation. I have a chapter in that book. So it's a great resource. To be honest, I haven't read the whole thing yet. Don't tell anyone that. But the people that have are telling me it's really good. And I'm also writing a book this year on deliberate creative teams. So that'll be based on my dissertation research. And I'm excited about that. So that'll be out probably next year, 2024.
And when that book comes out, will you come back and talk to us?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, that's a date, if not before.
Sounds good.
All right, Amy Climer, you are awesome. Thank you for being with us. This was really, really fun.
Thank you so much, David. I really enjoyed it.
And that wraps up another episode of The Selling Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, tell a friend, go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thesellingshow.com. See you next time.